Anne Webster, welcome back to Afternoon Briefing. You're a bit concerned around how these new guidelines for dealing with concussion on the sporting field or on the court all over the country might actually impact regional sporting clubs in particular. What's your primary concern there?
Look, children in particular need to be the focus in terms of brain trauma. So under no circumstances do I think it should be taken lightly. I think the AIS recommendations need to be seriously considered, but it's the application in regional smaller clubs. We don't have the kind of support that the AFL or the NRL, for example, have to be able to manage brain trauma. So the recommendations for rest, the recommendations to take people out of the team for a period of weeks, while it might seem incredibly costly to the team, there must be ways around that. And I think smaller clubs need the support in how they do that. You know, do football fields need to be made slightly smaller and the team taken, you know, one person out of the team while somebody's out from the other team so that it's a bit more even? Because we have a shortage of players too in regional communities, and yet they are the hub, the lifeblood of our communities, so we want to see that they have the support. I think the other point too, Matt, I would make is about medical care. Out in the regions, we have a crisis of shortage of workforce that needs to be acknowledged. We don't have the special brain trauma, concussion experts out in the regions. And consequently, teams need to be able to manage that kind of event. So by no means am I saying let's wrap children up in cotton wool. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I just think we need to have time. There needs to be some serious input about how regional community clubs manage these recommendations.
A few things to unpack there. Let's start with this issue of how regional sporting clubs might be dealing with this situation. Would you be demanding some sort of education program so that people who aren't necessarily trained as medical doctors are given that support when they're out there supporting their local football team or netball team or whatever contest it may well be, to be able to identify when someone has been subject to a head trauma and be able to properly respond to that situation?
Yeah, look, I think we need to understand that there are first aid people who are on the team who are there to support their team, but by no means do we have medics rushing around on the field. And in fact, to get an ambulance, for example, out to some of our regional towns, that's a big ask, and it will be a long delay in any treatment. So some form of training obviously is a necessity. I would be very surprised if they don't already have that training. However, I think that it is an important part of managing what is now becoming an obvious challenge and risk to playing sports. And having said that, Matt, the last thing we want is kids only playing sport on their iPads. You know, we want them out there playing these sports because it's incredibly important to the community, to families, and to the children themselves.
There's been a lot of attention on this issue at a national level. You've highlighted there how much the response has changed when it comes to our national leagues and the support that's given there. Has it become or has awareness increased in regional sporting competitions as well to these sort of risks over the last couple of years?
Look, I think we've just become more risk averse as a nation, frankly. So, yes, these risks are acknowledged by teams. I think the culture has changed as well. In the past, it might have been win at all costs, you know, fight on, keep playing, even if you've been unconscious for several minutes. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it is taken really seriously. And it's a matter of managing that so that we don't lose our regional teams.
I want to take you to the issue which is really dominating debate in politics this week, and that is the discussion around the government's revised Stage 3 tax cuts. The Coalition is making a lot of noise here about this being a broken promise from the Prime Minister. But can you see a situation where members of the Coalition would actually stand in the way of higher tax cuts for the bulk of the community?
Look, I think we need to keep the picture as it was. This was a bipartisan agreement between the Coalition and Labor. It was in place for 5 years. Labor had plenty of opportunity to pull their support for it. They went to this last election saying that they would keep it in place. They're words that are just ringing a little bit hollow right now. And so moving forward, this is a sweetener for, I suspect, as many of us do, that this is about the Dunkley by-election and lower to middle income earners receiving a bit more in their pay packet. But the reality of it is that real wages have gone down on average $153 a week. This is an additional sweetener of $15 a week for those same people, which by no means meets the actual need that is there. It is literally a sugar hit, and it doesn't start until July. I think the issue of integrity that the Prime Minister went to this last election about has been well and truly blown out of the water, and he has proven that he does not have integrity and that his word is not his bond.
But do you think that people, say in your electorate there'd be plenty who are going to be benefiting from this compared to what the original proposal under the Coalition was? Plenty of voters in the electorate of Mallee who are going to be getting an extra tax cut because they are earning less than $150,000. Do you think they really care about this argument of integrity, or if it's a broken promise? Politicians aren't exactly the most trusted bunch at the best of times.
Well, that's the sad truth, and I think that the sugar hit, as I say, that this really is for a by-election coming up, and hopefully to turn the polls for Albanese, because they have clearly gone in the wrong direction. I think it needs to be kept in line with, or on the same screen, if you like, with the long-term reform that these tax cuts were meant to be. So this is Stage 3. Stage 1 and 2 already came into place under the Coalition. This was Stage 3. The Prime Minister has effectively derailed the train on the reform that needed to take place to manage bracket creep. Because the fact is, as the opposition leader Peter Dutton said this morning, it's not 1.8 million people who are just going to benefit. Over the next 10 years, if you're going to take an additional $28 billion in tax, that's around 4 million people who will be paying more tax because we're not dealing with bracket creep. My personal view is that we should bring in indexation and we should deal with bracket creep. Absolutely, so it's not an issue moving forward.
Just finally and briefly, taking into account all that you've just said, would you vote against these tax cuts, even though you think that they are flawed and they are a broken promise? Could you honestly look at voters in your electorate and say that you're going to stand in the way?
Look, we will see what we actually determine as a party room. We're meeting, I'm going to Canberra this afternoon. We'll be meeting on Monday and we'll be discussing all of these things. Joint party room is Tuesday, and so we will come to a decision together. All of these views, consideration of people who are going through a cost of living crisis right now, needs to be first and foremost. There's no question about that. Nobody is doubting and nobody wants to see lower and middle income earners do worse off. So let's just be really clear about that. But there are other ways to support the cost of living crisis and the people who are wearing that right now.